Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly insight brief. I'm Ross Hill, Director of Intelligence at Risk's Global Risk Intelligence team. Joining me today is one of our Intelligence Analysts, Roman Fisher, and we're going to take you through the things that we think are important or interesting for this week. The first one, just a brief update on Ukraine. Fighting continues to be concentrated in the east and the south of the country, but primarily around Severodonetsk, which is a strategically important city in the Luhansk region. Russia made some gains there over the last few days, but Ukraine has counterattacked, and reporting now says the city is around 50-50 controlled by Russia and Ukraine. And also seeing reports from Russia that suggest another of its generals has been killed in that region in the fighting. Although the fighting is concentrated in the east and the south, Russia did actually target Kiev with cruise missiles, which is the first attack in the capital in over a month or so. That came after the United States and the United Kingdom said they were planning to supply Ukraine with multiple rocket launch systems that have a longer range and are much more accurate than Ukraine currently has access to. The range of those is up to around 50 miles or 80 kilometers. Vladimir Putin said that Russia would retaliate further if more advanced weaponry was supplied to Ukraine by hitting targets that it's so far avoided, which could potentially mean hitting Western arms supply lines. That would potentially risk an escalation in the conflict. Russia also said that it may have to take larger areas of Ukraine to protect its own territory if Ukraine had longer range weapons. But despite that more advanced weaponry being supplied to Ukraine, it could actually take several weeks for this to reach the battlefield because of the training required to use it, and the weaponry is unlikely to be decisive in the conflict. So a prolonged conflict remains the most likely scenario. But following that, and looking at the geopolitical impacts to businesses, according to a survey by West Monroe, which is a digital services firm, its quarterly executive poll, almost 80% of participants said that geopolitics had an increased effect on their business decision-making in the last 6 months. This is supported by a separate report from Ernst & Young that found that 90% of executives said their company had been impacted by unexpected political risks in the last 12 months. Ernst & Young also found that while executives are increasingly focused on political risk, they're actually less confident in their ability to manage it, most likely due to kind of the uncertainty and unpredictability of the situation seemingly at the moment. And then interestingly, the West Monroe survey found that most companies would actually be increasing spending on cybersecurity in reaction to the geopolitical concerns. And that's because cyber warfare is increasingly being utilized to gain competitive advantage in what was deemed an increasingly hostile international business environment. And then when you look at the other responses related, which is the graphic on the slide, they're all actually about reducing businesses' exposure to risk. So there does actually seem to be somewhat of a gap in understanding kind of the risk and then being able to make the right decisions. So we're still seeing a really strong need to clearly understand geopolitical and international security issues in order to make the best decision-making for businesses. And now I'm going to pass you over to Roman Fisher for our next update.
Thank you, Ross. In the arena of crime and violence, the recent killing of a retired Wisconsin Circuit Court judge, Jack Romer, has some questioning whether this event and others like it may be a sign of things to come. Assassinations are rare in the United States, but in the past, they have spiked when national tension was at its highest. Now, examples of this are times following the Civil War, the turn of the 20th century, and in the 1960s. Some experts claim that the current level of polarization and anger in the U.S. could be enough to spark a new period of assassinations. Recent events in 2019, James Hodgkinson, fueled by hatred for Republicans, shot 4 people practicing for the congressional baseball game. In 2018, passionate Trump supporter Cesar Sayak mailed pipe bombs to various people he identified as President Trump's enemies. In 2020, several men were arrested for plotting to kidnap and potentially kill Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And finally, some members of the Jan 6 mob declared that they would kill House Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Pence. Causes of assassinations. The Combating Terrorism Center at West Point states that political assassinations are generally more probable in countries that suffer from a combination of restrictions on political competition and intense polarization and fragmentation. In 1969, the Eisenhower Committee found that not just division, but major societal shifts lead to assassinations. The report states, and I quote, levels of political violence appear to crest during periods of accelerated social change. Identifying potential assassins. Characteristics common with assassins are shared with average citizens, and therefore it is very challenging to identify them. Because of this, protective measures, primarily from protection professionals, continues to be the best way to prevent successful assassinations. As it has been the case in the past, extremist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacy groups have produced several individuals determined to kill those they oppose. Alt-right groups such as the Proud Boys are often regarded as the most politically violent and represent a considerable threat. However, history shows that most presidential assassinations and attempted assassinations were committed by those categorized as being left of center. And finally, complicating matters, the Eisenhower Commission found that moments of national strife produce assassinations, even though killers are not personally ideologically motivated. In other words, most assassinations in the United States have been the product of individual passion or derangement. And I will hand it back over to Ross.
Thanks, Raymond. And then the last one, just a quick update on monkeypox, with cases still spreading, have in fact actually tripled over the past 3 weeks. So we're seeing increased number of cases and increased number of countries with suspected or confirmed cases. And you can see from comparing the two maps there, kind of the spread that we're seeing potentially through South America. And then really the epicenter has been Europe. And you can actually see kind of cases now moving eastwards away from Western Europe and then southwards, maybe into North Africa. But we'll keep tracking that. And that's it from us this week. We hope you enjoyed the content, and we'll see you again soon.